Hello and welcome. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I'd driven Monarch Pass 100 times before I ever worked it. My old man used to haul stranded vehicles off this same stretch of Route 9 every winter. And I'd ride shotgun on slow nights, watching him chain up semis in whiteout conditions without ever looking nervous. He used to say the mountain didn't care about your story, just whether you respected the cold. I thought I understood what that meant. When I pulled into the rest stop that first afternoon in early December, the sun was still out, turning the snowbanks into fields of crushed diamonds. The building looked exactly like every other state-run facility. Pale brick, flat roof, those narrow vertical windows that made it feel like a school nurse's office. A fuel island sat off to the side for maintenance vehicles, and beyond that, a chain-link fence surrounded the salt shed. Everything smelled like diesel and pine sap. I was there because I'd lied on my application, not about my ability to handle winter. I could do that in my sleep, but about why I needed the job. Back in Boulder, I had a court date I was avoiding, a landlord who'd started leaving certified letters, and an ex-business partner who'd hired someone to discuss payment options in a parking garage. The seasonal maintenance contract at Monarch Rest Stop paid cash equivalent through a state voucher system, reported under a department code that didn't show up on standard background checks, and required living on site in a small apartment attached to the office. It was perfect for disappearing. Ms. Rourke met me in the lobby, a woman in her 50s with the kind of severe ponytail that suggested she'd been a high school gym teacher in another life. She handed me a blue 3-ring binder with laminated pages. "Winter Operations Guide," she said. "Everything you need is in here. Shifts are 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. You'll log visitors, keep the building warm, and monitor weather reports. If visibility drops below a quarter mile, you lock the doors and post the closure sign." Simple. I flipped through it. Thermostat settings, radio codes, vending machine restocking schedules. It read like an OSHA manual written by someone who'd never seen snow. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it?" She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "You're not here to save anyone, Mr. Hart. You're here to keep the lights on." She left in a state pickup before the sun went down, and I spent the first hour exploring. The lobby had 6 round tables, a wall of vending machines, and a coffee maker that looked like it predated the building. The office was small, just a desk, a radio console, and a steel locker that opened with a key Ms. Rourke had left on the desk. Inside, I found a parka 2 sizes too big, a flashlight with corroded batteries, and a folded piece of paper that had been shoved into the gap between the locker's back panel and the wall. I unfolded it carefully. The paper was water-stained, the ink smudged in places, but the handwriting was clear, cramped and angular like someone had been writing in a hurry. Addendum. Winter rules. Last updated prior season. Name withheld by request. If the vending machine plays music, don't buy anything. If someone asks to use your phone, offer the landline only, never your personal cell. If you hear footsteps in the utility tunnel, don't check. If a driver asks you to open the overlook gate, refuse. If they ask twice, lie. Do not go outside after midnight unless you hear the plow horn. If the closure sign is already posted when you arrive for your shift, check the log for your own handwriting. Several lines had been crossed out and rewritten in different ink. One phrase, "Do not trust the second voice," had been scribbled over so many times it was illegible. I laughed out loud. It had to be a prank. Some bored seasonal worker's idea of hazing the new guy. I'd worked cold storage, warehouses, overnight gas stations, and a ski resort that made employees sleep in trailers without heat. I knew how these jobs worked. People got weird when they were isolated. They invented ghost stories to pass the time. Still, I folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket. The utility tunnel entrance was at the back of the building, down a narrow service stairwell that smelled like wet concrete and heating oil. I didn't go down that first night. I didn't need to. The building was warm, the radio worked, and the only visitor I had was a trucker who used the bathroom and left without saying a word. I made coffee. I logged his vehicle. I checked the weather report. Clear skies, low wind. At 3 in the morning, I stood outside and looked up at the Overlook Trail. It started just past the salt shed, a snow-covered footpath that wound uphill toward a fenced observation platform. A sign read, "Overlook closed. Winter hazard." The gate was chained shut, but the chain was loose enough that someone could slip through if they wanted. I wondered why anyone would bother. The stars were sharp and cold above me. The mountain was silent except for the wind moving through the pines. It was the kind of silence my father used to love, so deep it made your ears ring. I went back inside, locked the door, and slept in the office chair until dawn. When Ms. Rourke's replacement, a day shift guy named Carl, arrived at 6, he looked at me like I'd accomplished something. "You made it through one," he said. "Was I not supposed to?" He didn't answer. He just took the logbook and started his own shift. I drove down to the small apartment attached to the back of the building, showered, and slept until the sun went down again. That's when I made my first mistake. I decided the rules were a joke and I stopped taking them seriously. The second night felt like a victory lap. I'd survived my first shift without incident. The weather was still, clear, and I'd already started to fall into a rhythm. I knew where the good coffee filters were hidden, how to jiggle the radio antenna to get the weather station, and which vending machine had the least expired snacks. I reread the handwritten rules while eating a pack of stale pretzels. If the vending machine plays music, don't buy anything. I looked at the vending machines. There were 3 of them humming quietly against the wall. None of them had speakers. Even if they did, why would that matter? It wasn't like a candy bar was going to summon a demon. If someone asks to use your phone, offer the landline only. That one almost made sense. If someone was stranded, you didn't want them disappearing with your personal phone. Fair enough. If you hear footsteps in the utility tunnel, don't check. Now that was just stupid. If something was wrong with the pipes or the generator, I'd need to check. That's what I was being paid for. I folded the paper and left it on the desk. If this was hazing, it was pretty weak. Around 10 p.m., I heard the grind of heavy tires on snow. A woman in a thick Carhartt jacket pushed through the front doors, stamping her boots on the mat. She had the kind of face that looked both young and exhausted. Sharp cheekbones, dark circles under her eyes, a ponytail pulled so tight it looked painful. "Tess Morrow," she said, not waiting for me to ask. "Plow mechanic. I use the bay and back." "Evan Hart. I'm the new night guy." She nodded like she'd already known that. "You find the creepy list yet?" I smiled. "Yeah. Is that your work?" "God, no. That thing's been floating around for years. Everybody adds to it." She poured herself a cup of coffee without asking and leaned against the counter. "I've got my own list. Better one." "Better how?" She pulled a folded index card from her pocket and slid it across the desk. "Tess's rules updated. If the vending machine plays music, it's trying to warn you. Buy something to acknowledge it. If someone asks to use your phone, let them. Refusing makes them angry. If you hear footsteps in the utility tunnel, you must check. They're warning you something's wrong. If the closure sign is already up, don't assume you posted it. Someone else might be here." I stared at her. "These are the exact opposite of the other list." "Yeah?" Tess sipped her coffee. That's because the other list was written by someone who didn't make it through the season. And you did? Second winter, she said. I'm still here. I didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't joking. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was stating it like a fact, the way you tell someone the building had no cell service or the bathroom door stuck in humid weather. Look, she said, I don't care which list you follow. Just don't follow both. Pick one and commit. The worst thing you can do is hesitate. She finished her coffee, rinsed the cup in the bathroom sink, and disappeared into the snowplow bay. I heard the clang of tools, the hiss of a pneumatic lift, and then nothing. I looked at both lists side by side. They couldn't both be right. But if they were both wrong, that meant someone, maybe several people, had spent real time trying to figure out how to survive this job. And they still hadn't agreed. I decided to follow the official manual. It was boring, bureaucratic, and made no mention of vending machines or tunnels or voices. That felt safer. At midnight, a sedan pulled in. A family of 4, parents and 2 kids under 10. They looked cold but not panicked. The father asked if the restrooms were open. I said yes. They used them, bought some snacks from the vending machines, and left 20 minutes later. I logged their vehicle. Everything was normal. At 2 a.m., I heard a faint metallic groan from below the floor. It sounded like pipes expanding, or maybe something shifting in the tunnel. I thought about the rule, don't check, and Tess's version, you must check. I didn't check. Nothing happened. At 4 a.m., I went outside to scrape frost off the fuel island's card reader. The overlook gate was still chained. The snow was smooth and undisturbed. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, turning from black to deep blue. I felt good, confident. I'd worked 2 nights and nothing had tried to kill me. When Carl showed up at 6, I was almost disappointed. Quiet night, he asked. Dead quiet. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Let's hope it stays that way. I wanted to ask him about the lists, about Tess, about what making it through the season actually meant. But I didn't. I told myself it didn't matter. I went back to the apartment, made eggs, and fell asleep with the TV on. That was the last normal night I had. The storm hit on my 5th night. Not a blizzard, just a heavy, wet snow that turned the pass into a tunnel of white static. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet, and the wind howled against the building like something trying to get in. I posted the closure sign at 9 p.m., locked the front doors, and settled in with a thermos of coffee and a paperback I'd found in the apartment. At 11:30, the vending machine started playing music. It wasn't loud, just a faint, tinny melody, simple and repetitive, like a music box winding down. I looked up from my book and stared at the machines. The sound was coming from the middle one, the one that sold chips and candy bars. I walked over slowly. The machine's display was dark, no lights, no error codes, but the melody kept playing, soft and nostalgic, like something I'd heard a long time ago but couldn't quite place. I thought about the rule. If the vending machine plays music, don't buy anything. I thought about Tess's version. Buy something to acknowledge it. And then I thought, this is stupid. It's a machine. It's malfunctioning. I fed $2 into the slot and pressed the button for a Snickers bar. The machine went silent immediately. The candy bar dropped into the tray with a soft thud. I picked it up, unwrapped it, and took a bite. It tasted normal. Maybe a little stale, but that was expected. I finished it, threw the wrapper in the trash, and went back to my book. Nothing happened. No flickering lights, no sudden cold, no shadowy figure stepping out of the bathroom. I felt a weird sense of triumph. The rules weren't real. I'd just proven it. It wasn't until an hour later, when I was throwing the trash away, that I noticed the wrapper at the bottom of the bin. I pulled it out. The Snickers logo was gone. In its place was just blank, waxy brown paper. No barcode, no nutrition label, no fine print. Just a smooth, unmarked surface with a faint gray stain in the center, roughly the size and shape of a thumbprint. I turned the wrapper over. Nothing. I checked the vending machine. The Snickers bars behind the glass all had normal packaging. I told myself it was a misprint, a factory error. I threw the wrapper away again and didn't think about it. But that night I dreamed about my father. We were driving up the pass in his tow truck, the same one he'd driven when I was a kid. He was humming something, a simple, repetitive tune that I couldn't quite recognize. The windshield wipers were going, but the snow wasn't melting. It just kept piling up, thick and wet, until I couldn't see the road anymore. "Pull over," I said. He didn't answer. He just kept driving, kept humming. "Dad, pull over." He turned to look at me and his face was wrong. Not monstrous, not rotting, just flat like a photograph printed on skin. "You invited me," he said. I woke up in the office chair, sweating despite the cold. The lobby was empty. The vending machines were silent. The storm had passed, and the parking lot outside was smooth and white under the security lights. I checked the log. I'd written 3 entries I didn't remember writing. 11:47 p.m. Visitor arrived, no vehicle visible. 12:03 a.m. Visitor requested access to overlook, denied. 12:15 a.m. Visitor left through front door, did not see face, my handwriting, my pen. I looked at the front doors. They were still locked from the inside. I went outside and checked the snow. There were no footprints leading away from the building, none at all. Just mine, from earlier, already half filled with fresh snow. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat at the desk until Carl arrived. He looked at the logbook and frowned. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Quiet night." He didn't look convinced. 2 nights later, I arrived for my shift and found the closure sign already posted. I stood in the parking lot staring at it. The sign was metal, mounted on a hinged post that you had to manually swing into place across the entrance. It was heavy. You couldn't do it by accident. I hadn't posted it. I checked the office. The logbook was open on the desk, and there was a new entry at the top of the page. 6:02 p.m. Closure sign posted due to visibility conditions. EH, my initials, my handwriting. But I'd arrived at 7:45. I grabbed the radio and called Ms. Rourke. She answered on the second burst of static. "Hart, what's wrong?" "Did Carl post the closure sign before he left?" "Why would he do that? Weather's clear." "Someone posted it, and there's an entry in the log I didn't write." Silence. Then, "Are you sure?" "I'm looking at it right now." Another pause. "Sometimes the previous shift forgets to log things. Maybe he did it and signed your name by mistake." "Why would he sign my name?" "I don't know, Hart. I'm not there." Her voice was clipped, professional. "If you're concerned, document it and we'll review it later. Otherwise, proceed with your shift." She hung up. I pulled the closure sign down and dragged it back to its resting position. My hands were shaking. At 9 p.m., a car pulled into the lot. I watched it through the window. It was an old sedan, maybe early 2000s, with a cracked windshield and a dented front bumper. It rolled to a stop near the fuel island, engine running, headlights on. No one got out. I waited. After 5 minutes, I grabbed my coat and walked outside. The cold hit me like a fist. My breath plumed in front of me, thick and white. I approached the car slowly. The windows were fogged on the inside, but I could see shapes, figures in the front and back seats. I knocked on the driver's side window. The glass cleared instantly, like someone had wiped it from the inside. A man sat behind the wheel. He looked about 60 with a gray beard and a flannel jacket. He smiled at me. Evening, he said. His voice was muffled through the glass, but I could hear it clearly. We're just warming up. Rough drive. No problem, I said. Restrooms are open if you need them. Appreciate it. I looked at the back seat. 2 kids sat there, maybe 8 and 10, both staring straight ahead. They didn't blink. They didn't move. You folks okay? I asked. The man's smile didn't change. Just tired. Long trip. I glanced at the car's tires. There were no tracks in the snow behind them. The lot had been empty when I arrived, and I hadn't heard the car pull in. Where are you coming from? I asked. The man's smile widened slightly. South. South where? Just south. I stepped back. Something was wrong. Not wrong like danger. Wrong like a photograph that had been edited badly, where the lighting didn't match and the shadows pointed in different directions. You should come inside, I said. It's warmer. In a minute, the man said. The car doors opened simultaneously, all 4 of them like they were on the same hinge. The family stepped out in perfect synchronization. They were soaking wet. Water dripped from their hair, their coats, their shoes. It pooled on the asphalt, steaming slightly in the cold. But their coats were dry. I could see it clearly. The fabric wasn't dark with moisture. It wasn't clinging to their skin. It looked completely dry, even as water poured off them like they'd just climbed out of a lake. We'd like to use the phone, the man said. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried to remember the rules. If someone asks to use your phone, offer the landline only. Or was it, let them? Refusing makes them angry. Landline's inside, I said. They followed me into the lobby, moving in a silent line. I unlocked the door and held it open, and they filed past me one by one. Their footsteps didn't make a sound. I pointed to the desk. Phone's over there. The man walked to the desk and picked up the receiver. He didn't dial. He just held it to his ear and stood there, staring at the wall. The 2 kids walked to the vending machines. The woman, I realized I hadn't looked at her face yet, walked to the window and stared out at the parking lot. I stayed near the door, my hand on the knob. The vending machine started playing music, the same melody, soft, repetitive, nostalgic. The kids turned to look at me in perfect unison. Do you have quarters? The girl asked. Her voice was mine, not similar, identical. The exact pitch, the exact cadence. I stumbled backward and hit the door. The man hung up the phone and turned around. His face was still smiling, but now I could see the details I'd missed before. His eyes were too wide, his teeth were too straight. His expression didn't move when he spoke. Thank you for your help, he said. We'd like to access the overlook now. It's closed, I said. We'd like to access it anyway. I can't open it. You can. I shook my head. My heart was hammering so hard I thought I might pass out. The man took a step forward. Water dripped from his sleeve and hissed when it hit the floor. We've been waiting, he said. You invited us. I didn't. You did. The woman turned from the window. I still couldn't see her face. It was like my eyes slid off her every time I tried to focus. The second time is a lie, she said. And then they were gone. Not walking away, not disappearing in a flash of light, just gone like a video that had skipped forward. The lobby was empty. I checked the parking lot. The car was gone. There were no tire tracks, no footprints, no water pooled on the floor. I ran to the desk and opened the logbook. A new entry in my handwriting, 9:17 p.m., family of 4. Requested overlook access. Approved. E.H. I hadn't written it. I grabbed the radio. Ms. Rourke answered immediately like she'd been waiting. What's happening here? I said. My voice was shaking. What the fuck is happening? There was a long pause. Read the rest of the binder, Hart, she said quietly. Page 47. She hung up. I grabbed the blue binder and flipped to page 47. It was blank. No, not blank. There was text, but it was so faint I had to hold it up to the light to read it. Incident Suppression Protocol Winter Overlap Event. And below that, in smaller print, the state does not acknowledge the presence of non-standard visitors. Staff are instructed to log all interactions as routine and proceed with normal operations. Rotation is mandatory. Duration of assignment should not exceed 90 days. I read it 3 times. Then I locked myself in the office and didn't move until Carl arrived. I didn't sleep that day. I sat in the apartment with the lights on and the door locked, reading every page of the Winter Operations Guide. Most of it was exactly what Ms. Rourke had described: thermostat settings, emergency contacts, restocking procedures. But starting around page 30, the language started to change. The sentences became shorter, more directive, less explanatory. Page 34. If a visitor remains in the lobby for more than 2 hours without speaking, do not engage. Document time of departure only. Page 39. In the event of simultaneous arrivals, prioritize logging vehicles with visible license plates. Page 42. Staff are not required to verify visitor identities. Visual confirmation is sufficient. And then page 47, the one Ms. Rourke had told me to read. The text was faint, almost hidden, like it had been printed with a dying ink cartridge. I turned to the back of the binder. There were several pockets sewn into the inside cover, the kind meant for storing loose documents. I opened the first one. Inside was a stack of a closure: do not unlock the doors. They are not coming from the road. If a visitor signs the log with a name you recognize, do not acknowledge it. If the tunnel footsteps stop suddenly, leave the building immediately. If the vending machine plays music more than once in a single shift, you have already made a mistake. The last line had been circled over and over, the pen pressed so hard it had torn through the paper. I grabbed the radio and called Ms. Rourke. It was 2 in the afternoon. She should have been awake. She answered on the first try. "Hart, why didn't you tell me?" I said. "Tell you what? That this place is fucking haunted, that people have died here, that the rules are real." There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing. "No one's died," she said finally. "People quit. People transfer. People finish their contracts and leave." "What about RG? The person who wrote this list?" "I don't know who that is." "Bullshit." Her voice hardened. "Listen to me, Hart. You signed a contract. You agreed to work nights at a remote location. You were informed of the conditions. If you want to quit, that's your choice, but you'll forfeit your pay and housing. You didn't inform me of shit. I gave you the manual. Everything you need is in there. Then why are there fake closure notices? Why are there incident reports with half the text blacked out?" She didn't answer. "Ms. Rourke, what is this place?" When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost gentle. "It's a rest stop, Hart. It's a place where things pass through. Most of the time it's normal, sometimes it's not. We don't know why, we don't know how, but we keep it staffed, we keep it running, and we rotate people out before they get hurt." "Before they get hurt," I repeated. "So people do get hurt, not if they follow the rules." "Which rules?" "There are 4 different lists in this building." "That's because the rules change depending on who you are," she said. "What works for one person doesn't work for another. You have to figure out your own version." I wanted to scream. I wanted to reach through the radio and shake her. "Why me?" I asked. "Why did you hire me?" She hesitated. "Because you needed to disappear, and this place is good at making people disappear." The line went dead. I sat there staring at the radio, my hands shaking. I thought about my father. I thought about the past, the tow truck, the childhood trips. I thought about the man in the lobby who'd smiled at me with 2 straight teeth and said, "You invited us." I thought about the candy wrapper with the thumbprint. I went back to the office that night and found Tess in the snowplow bay working on a hydraulic line. "I need to know what you know," I said. She looked up, her face smudged with grease. "About? About this place. About the rules. About what's really happening." She set down her wrench and wiped her hands on her pants. "You had an encounter." "Yeah. What kind?" I told her everything. The family, the car without tracks, the logbook entries I didn't write. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You broke the vending machine rule," she said. "I know. And now they think you're open for business." "What does that mean?" She stood up and walked to the bay door, looking out at the dark expanse of the parking lot. "The overlook," she said. "It's not closed because of weather, it's closed because it's a door. And doors go both ways." "A door to what?" "I don't know. No one does, but things come through, not all the time, just when someone opens it. I didn't open it. You invited them in, that's the first step." She turned to look at me. "The vending machine music is a test. If you ignore it, you pass. If you respond, you're saying you're willing to engage. And once you engage, they start asking for more. Why doesn't anyone just destroy the vending machine? They tried 3 years ago. Unplugged it, hauled it out, dumped it in a landfill." She smiled grimly. "It was back the next night, same spot, same candy bars." I felt cold, not the normal cold of winter, but something deeper. Something that had nothing to do with temperature. "What do I do?" I asked. Tess pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to me. It was another list, this one written in pencil. "These are the rules that worked for the guy before me," she said. "He lasted a full season, then he left and never came back." I unfolded the paper. "Rules for when you've already fucked up. They will ask for 3 things: the phone, the tunnel, the overlook. Refuse all 3. If they use a name you recognize, do not respond. They are not that person. If they touch you, you will feel cold for hours. Do not try to warm up. Let it pass naturally. They can only enter the building if you let them in. Once inside, they can stay until you make them leave. The tunnel is warm because it runs deep. They hate the warmth. Use it if you have to. If you survive until morning, they will forget you." For a while, I looked up at Tess. "What's the 3rd thing? The phone, the tunnel, the overlook?" "The phone lets them call," she said. "The tunnel lets them travel. The overlook lets them through." "Through to where?" "Here," she said, "permanently." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. "One more thing," Tess said. "The guy who wrote that list, his name was RG. What happened to him?" She looked at me for a long moment. "He opened the overlook." I stopped trusting paper after that. Every list contradicted the others, and I couldn't tell which one had been written by someone who survived and which had been written by someone who thought they'd survived but were already too far gone to realize it. So I started keeping my own notes. Not rules, observations. I used the back pages of the logbook where no one would look. I wrote down everything that happened, every detail, every inconsistency. I started to see patterns. Pattern 1, timing. The wrong visitors never arrived randomly. They always came after specific triggers. After the vending machine played music, 100% of the time. After I wrote something in the logbook I didn't remember writing 80% of the time. After the closure sign was posted without my knowledge 60% of the time. Pattern 2, requests. They always asked for the same things in the same order. First, the phone. Second, access to the tunnel. Third, the overlook gate. If you refused the first, they'd try the second. If you refused the second, they'd try the third. But if you gave them any of the 3, I had a feeling you didn't get another shift. Pattern 3. Mimicry. They copied things, voices, handwriting, mannerisms, the girl who'd spoken in my voice, the logbook entries in my handwriting, the man who'd smiled like he was remembering how smiling worked. But they weren't perfect. There were always small glitches, eyes too wide, movements too synchronized, faces that looked right until you tried to focus on them. Pattern 4. Emotional hooks. They used names and phrases that hurt, not physically, emotionally. The man in the lobby had said, "We've been waiting." That was something my father used to say when I was late picking him up. The woman had said, "The second time is a lie." I didn't know what that meant, but it made my chest tighten like I'd heard it before in a context I'd forgotten. I realized they weren't just mimicking people. They were pulling from me. My memories, my guilt, my history. Pattern 5. The Overlook. No one had ever explained what the Overlook actually was. It was just a fenced observation platform halfway up the hill with a view of the valley below. I'd been up there as a kid. It was nothing special, but every single wrong visitor eventually asked about it. On my 9th night, I decided to see it for myself. I waited until 3 a.m. when the building was empty and the parking lot was silent. I grabbed a flashlight, put on my parka, and walked outside. The Overlook trail was covered in snow, but the path was still visible, a narrow groove winding uphill through the pines. The chain on the gate hung loose, clinking softly in the wind. I slipped through and started climbing. The air was colder up here. Not just winter cold, wrong cold, the kind that made your teeth ache and your lungs hurt. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating tree trunks and snowdrifts and nothing else. It took me 15 minutes to reach the platform. It was just a wooden deck with a railing, maybe 20 feet across. The view should have been spectacular. Miles of valley, the lights of distant towns, the curve of the highway below, but I couldn't see any of that. The air beyond the railing was black. Not dark, black, like someone had hung a curtain made of void. My flashlight beam didn't penetrate it. It just stopped, swallowed whole. I stepped closer to the railing. The black shifted, not like fabric moving, like something massive and slow turning its attention toward me. I heard a sound, low, resonant, almost below the range of hearing. It vibrated in my chest, in my teeth, in the bones of my skull. And then I heard my father's voice. "Evan," not from behind me, from the black. "Evan, I'm cold." I gripped the railing, my knuckles went white. "You're not real," I said. "I'm cold, kiddo, open the gate." I closed my eyes. "You're not my father. I've been waiting. You said you'd come back." I had said that. Years ago, the last time I'd seen him alive. He'd been in the hospital, dying of pneumonia, and I'd promised I'd visit the next day, but I'd been busy. I'd had a meeting. I told myself I'd go the day after. He died that night. "You're not him," I said again, but my voice cracked. The black rippled. For just a moment I saw a shape, a silhouette of a man standing just beyond the railing, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold, exactly how my father used to stand. "Let me in," he said. "I just want to be warm." I opened my eyes and stepped back from the railing. "If you were really him," I said quietly, "you'd know I can't." The shape paused. "And if you knew me," I continued, "you'd know I'm a coward. I'm the guy who didn't visit. I'm the guy who ran. I'm the guy who lies on job applications and hides in the mountains because he's too scared to face his own life." The black didn't respond. "So whatever you are," I said, "you're wasting your time. I'm not worth it." I turned and walked back down the trail. Behind me I heard the sound again, low and resonant and patient. It wasn't angry, it was waiting. When I got back to the rest stop, I added a new observation to my notes. Pattern 6. Personal history makes you vulnerable. They don't just copy you, they know what hurts. And below that, I wrote my first rule. If someone uses a name that makes your chest hurt, don't answer them. I underlined it twice. The worst storm of the season hit on my 14th night. The Weather Service called it a whiteout event. Winds gusting over 60 miles an hour, visibility near zero, temperatures dropping to 15 below. I posted the closure sign at 8 p.m. and locked the doors. By 9, the world outside was a wall of white noise. At 10, the power went out. The lobby lights died. The vending machines went silent. The hum of the heating system cut off, leaving only the howl of wind and the creak of the building settling. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the breaker panel. Nothing was tripped. I tried the radio, dead static. I tried my cell phone, no signal. I was alone in the dark in a building that was getting colder by the minute. I knew what I had to do. The backup generator was in the utility tunnel, 30 feet below the building. There was a manual restart switch down there. I stood at the top of the service stairwell, shining my flashlight down into the darkness. If you hear footsteps in the utility tunnel, don't check. But Tess's rule said the opposite. You must check. They're warning you. And the rule I'd written said, personal history makes you vulnerable. I started down the stairs. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling and walls. The air was warm, too warm, thick and damp, like breathing inside someone's mouth. My flashlight beam wobbled. My hands were shaking. Halfway down the tunnel, I heard footsteps behind me. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I turned around slowly. My father stood at the bottom of the stairs, hands in his pockets, snow melting in his hair. You shouldn't be down here, kiddo, he said. His voice was perfect. Not the mimicry from the Overlook. This was exact. Every inflection, every slight rasp from decades of cigarettes. You're not real, I said. I'm real enough. He smiled, tired, sad, the way he'd smiled in the hospital. You know why you're here, right? I'm here because I needed a job. No, you're here because you're running, same as always. I clenched my jaw. Fuck you. You didn't visit me, he said quietly. You promised, and you didn't come. I know. You let me die alone. I know. He took a step closer. The shadows moved wrong around him, bending in directions that didn't match. The light. Open the Overlook, Evan. I'm so cold. I just want to be warm. I stared at him, at the shape wearing his face. Here's the thing, I said. My father wouldn't ask me to do that. The shape paused. He'd tell me to get the generator running, I continued. He'd tell me to do my job, because that's who he was. He didn't ask for help. He just worked. The shape's expression didn't change, but something shifted in its posture. Something uncertain. You're not him, I said. And even if you were, I wouldn't do it, because he taught me not to open doors I can't close. I turned my back on it and walked deeper into the tunnel. Behind me, I heard the footsteps again. Faster now, closer. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I reached the generator, found the restart switch, and pulled it. The generator coughed, sputtered, and roared to life. Lights flickered on overhead. Dim, yellow, buzzing. I turned around. The tunnel was empty. No footsteps, no shape, just warm air and the hum of machinery. I climbed the stairs back to the lobby. The lights were on. The vending machines were humming. Everything was normal, except for the logbook. I opened it and found a new entry written in handwriting that wasn't mine and wasn't anyone else's I recognized. 10:34 p.m. Generator restarted. Visitor denied access. Insufficient. I stared at the word. Insufficient. Insufficient what? Insufficient fear? Insufficient guilt? Or insufficient bait? I grabbed a pen and wrote my own entry below it. 10:40 p.m. All systems operational, building secure, no visitors. EH. I underlined no visitors 3 times. I didn't see another wrong visitor that night. But I knew they weren't done with me. They were learning, and so was I. By my 16th night, I'd stopped reading the lists entirely. I kept them, Tess's rules, RG's rules, the original handwritten addendum. But I didn't follow them. They were data points, not commandments. I realized something crucial. The rules were patterns, and patterns could be broken. The things that came through the overlook, whatever they were, operated on expectation. They expected fear. They expected compliance. They expected you to follow a script. The vending machine music was a test. Would you engage or ignore? The mimicry was bait. Would you respond to emotional manipulation? The 3 requests, phone, tunnel, overlook, were a progression, each one testing how far you'd go. But what if you didn't play? That night, I did something no one had told me to do. I unplugged the vending machine, not permanently, just for the shift. I walked over, found the power cord, and yanked it out of the wall. The machine went dark and silent. Then I took the closure sign and brought it inside the building. I propped it against the wall behind the desk where I could see it. If it was going to appear on its own, I wanted to know when. At midnight, I heard a car pull into the lot. I looked out the window. It was the same sedan from before. Cracked windshield, dented bumper, no tracks in the snow. The family stepped out. Same synchronized movements. Same wet clothes and dry fabric. They walked to the front door. I didn't unlock it. The man knocked, polite, patient. I stayed at the desk watching. He knocked again. I picked up the radio and spoke into it, even though no one was on the other end. Yeah, I see them. No, I'm not opening the door. Building's closed. The man pressed his face against the glass. His breath didn't fog it. We'd like to come inside, he said. His voice was muffled but clear. Can't help you, I said. Closed for weather. The weather is clear. Not according to my report. The woman stepped forward. I still couldn't see her face. She raised one hand and pressed it against the glass. The glass cracked, not shattered, just a single hairline fracture spreading slowly from where her palm touched. You invited us, she said. No, I said. I made a mistake and I'm correcting it. The 2 kids moved to the vending machines and stared at them through the glass. The machines were dark. The girl turned to look at me. Why is it off? She asked in my voice. Because I turned it off. Turn it back on. No. The family stood there, silent, staring at me through the glass. And then the man smiled. You're learning, he said. They walked back to the car, got in and drove away, still leaving no tracks. I sat at the desk, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I'd refused them entry, they'd left, it had worked. But I wasn't stupid, I knew it wasn't over. At 2 a.m. I heard footsteps in the tunnel. I grabbed my flashlight and went to the stairwell. I stood at the top and listened. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, coming closer. I didn't go down. Instead, I grabbed the space heater from the office, carried it to the top of the stairs and turned it on full blast. Hot air poured down into the tunnel. The footsteps stopped. Then, after a long pause, they retreated. Tess had been right about one thing. They hated the warmth. At 4 a.m., I went outside. The storm had passed. The sky was clear, full of stars so bright they looked like holes punched in black paper. I walked to the overlook gate. The chain was still in place, but the gate was open just an inch, like someone had tried to push it and stopped. I closed it. I wrapped the chain tighter and secured it with a padlock I'd found in the maintenance shed. Then I stood there, staring up at the trail. I'm not opening it, I said out loud. "I don't care what you sound like. I don't care what you promise. I'm not letting you through." The black beyond the platform didn't respond, but I felt it listening. When I got back to the rest stop, I wrote a new entry in the logbook. 4:23 a.m. Overlook gate secured, no visitors, building status normal, EH. And below that, I added one more line. They're not ghosts, they're not demons, they're something that wants in, and the only thing stopping them is me saying no. At 6 a.m., Carl arrived. He looked at me, then at the unplugged vending machine, then at the closure sign propped against the wall. "Rough night?" he asked. "Not really," I said. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. I went back to the apartment and slept for 10 hours straight. When I woke up, I found a note slipped under my door. It was from Tess. "You're doing better than most. Don't get cocky." Tian, I folded it and put it in my pocket. I finished my contract on February 28th, 90 days exactly as specified. Ms. Rourke arrived in person to process my paperwork and hand me my final voucher payment. "You made it," she said. "Yeah. Not many do." I didn't answer. I just signed the forms and packed my things. Before I left, I went to the office one last time. I opened the steel locker and pulled out the original handwritten rules, the ones I'd found on my first night. I turned them over and wrote on the back. Rules that actually worked, EH, Winter 2026. The rest stop is not a shelter. It's a filter. You are the membrane. Your job is to let the right things through and keep the wrong things out. If the vending machine plays music, you've already been noticed. Unplug it if you have to. They can't test you if the test is offline. Do not trust comfort that arrives on schedule. If something feels like a memory, it's bait. If someone sounds like someone you miss, it is not kindness. It's reconnaissance. They are learning how to hurt you. Refuse all 3 requests: phone, tunnel, overlook. If you give them one, they'll take all 3. They can only enter if you let them in. They can only stay if you let them stay. The doors, the gates, the tunnels, they're all just metaphors. The real boundary is you. If you need to survive, you will have to lie. You will have to refuse people who sound like they're in danger. Decide now what that makes you, because once you're in the moment, it's too late to choose. I folded the paper and left it in the locker. Then I walked out to my car, threw my bag in the back, and started driving down the pass. I made it about 5 miles before I saw the sign. Rest stop, 2 miles. An arrow pointed back the way I'd come. I slowed down, checked my odometer. I'd definitely been driving away from the rest stop, not toward it. I kept going, another mile, another sign. Rest stop, 1 mile. The arrow still pointed behind me. I pulled over and got out of the car. The air was cold and still. The pass stretched out in both directions, empty highway, snow-covered trees, no other vehicles. I looked back up the mountain. I couldn't see the rest stop from here, but I could see the overlook platform just barely visible through the trees, and for just a moment I thought I saw a figure standing at the railing, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched. I got back in the car and kept driving. The sign stopped after another mile. When I reached the valley, I pulled into a gas station and checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Ms. Rourke. No voicemails. I didn't call her back. Instead, I filled up my tank, bought a coffee, and got back on the road. I drove south for 2 days before I stopped checking my rearview mirror. But even now, months later, living in a different state, working a different job, I still think about it. I think about the overlook, about the black beyond the railing, about the shapes that stood in the snow and asked to be let in. I think about the rules and how many people before me had tried to write them down, how many had gotten them wrong, how many had disappeared trying to figure out the right answer. And I think about the last thing Tess said to me the night before I left. You did good, Hart, but don't think you're done. What do you mean? She'd looked at me with those tired eyes, grease-stained hands shoved in her pockets. You didn't open the door, but you stood close enough to be seen. And once they see you, they don't forget. I'd asked her what that meant. She'd just smiled. Drive safe. I did. But sometimes, late at night, I hear my phone buzz with a call from a number I don't recognize. And when I let it go to voicemail, I hear the sound of wind, of something patient and cold, waiting on the other end of a line I'll never answer. And sometimes when I'm driving at night and I see a rest stop sign, I feel the urge to pull over, to go inside, to check the vending machines, but I don't, because I know what's waiting. And I know that the only reason I survived was because I learned one simple truth. Some doors are supposed to stay closed, not because of what's behind them, but because of what we become when we open them.